So, I'm not going to go into a lot of material about dementia because this is mainly about engagement and not so much about the disease itself, but just overall dementia is caused when the brain is damaged by diseases or a series of strokes. Alzheimer's disease is the most common, but many other diseases result in dementia. And the specific symptoms really depend on the parts of the brain that are damaged, and the speed of progression varies. We were fortunate with my father that the speed of progression was pretty slow. He had it for many, many years. So it's a set of symptoms that reflect impairment of cognitive functioning, such as memory, difficulty recalling recent events. If you asked my father what he had just eaten, he would not be able to tell you. But he might have been able to tell you what he ate 25 years before that. Executive functioning, concentrating, planning, organizing, like he could not start a conversation, for example. And then language, difficulty following conversation or finding the right word. And so early on that really does become apparent because it actually takes quite a bit of executive functioning to be in a social group and contribute and have a conversation. Visual spatial skills, problems judging distances and seeing objects in 3 dimensions. We were talking a little bit about his progression over lunch, and he was a fantastic driver, and certainly one of those people who never asked directions, and mostly didn't need them, but when we didn't even know it was happening, there were a couple things. One was he was driving and parking the car, and he hit like the mirror of the car next to him, and he was really mortified by that, and he never did that, anything like that, never before. And then orientation, confusion or losing track of date and place. That's pretty universal. Changes in mood and behavior, irritable, anxious, agitated, withdrawn, depressed. A colleague of mine actually, when I suspected something was going on, did a complete neuropsychological evaluation of him. I think it was in 1999. And she talked to me individually afterwards, kind of warning me that my father might show some aggressive or agitated behavior, and how did I want to tell my mother that. We were very blessed that we did not have that, although I've certainly seen many other cases where people were not so fortunate. Actually, in fact, my father's demeanor changed for the better, much for the better. I was driving with him one day in my non-air conditioned, very hot car, which was standard, and he looked at me and said, "You're still type A." I used to be, but I'm not anymore. And that was actually really true. He was very type A. He was very, I'm a lot like him in terms of energy levels, very, very, energetic and doing umpteen things. And in dementia actually was the first time that he could relax and kind of have a more Zen-like state, which is very different. So the medical model really focuses on etiology, prevalence, progression of symptoms, and treatments. And currently there is no definitive knowledge of cause or cure. With Alzheimer's, they know, and that's diagnosed on autopsy, only definitively, where there's neurofibrillary plaques and tangles. That I did a neuropsychology internship years ago at the VA in Cincinnati, and we went to autopsies and saw the things, and you could really see the changes in the brain. But there's still, I'm hoping, and I think that probably by the next generation there will be a lot more of a cure than there is right now. Anti-dementia drugs may slow the progression in the early stages. And we'll get back to the antipsychotic drugs because even though, yes, they may help reduce depression, agitation, and or aggression, they can have harmful side effects, and engaging people in activities has at least the same outcome in terms of reduction in agitation as you would if you were to use risperidone, for example. So, in contrast, I didn't know about the salutogenic model until I started researching this. That's my parents' and my father's 80th birthday. unlike the medical model, the salutogenic model, named by researcher Aaron Antonovsky, who wrote a book on health, stress, and coping, really looks at how people survive and adapt to health issues or to very stressful events. And he looked actually at women who had survived the concentration camps in Germany and found that 29% of the women he studied did not show really adverse effects from it. So this model is much more looking at coping and adapting. And as you'll see, you know, so I think so much of what happens with dementia in terms of whether it the person becomes completely isolated and unable to communicate versus still staying engaged really depends on not just the individual that has dementia, but on the people that are close to him or her. So with dementia, the emphasis is on adjustment by the person and significant others to changes in abilities, such as cognition and understanding, making sense of the world and making decisions, communication, speaking, expressing needs and emotions, physical ability, skills, organization and structure, interpersonal connections, relationships, social life, and capacity for self-care. What you will see when you watch the video is that my mother would meet my father wherever he was at. She would always ask him where he was. And they had a whole world of imagination together. And sometimes he would be Edith von Stroheim, who was a German actor. She would never correct him. She would never tell him, no, that's not who you really are, or these are not the facts of your life. She would just go with it. And I know those of us that work with, patients that are psychotic know that you don't argue with somebody and tell them that their delusions are wrong. You try to meet them where they are, and that's a I hope an important takeaway that will come from today. So many environments lack stimulation. In an evaluation of 17 care homes, it was found that people spent less than 13% of waking hours engaged in meaningful activity. Another study found that residents on average spent only 2 minutes a day in meaningful social interaction. Unmet needs can precipitate increased irritability and aggression and often result in prescription of antipsychotic medication. And my father spent most of his last days at the Soldiers' Home in Holyoke, which was a veterans facility, and it was an excellent facility in terms of physical care. But there was not much, other than some musical events at times, there was really not any kind of one-on-one interaction. And my mother visited him every day, and we all visited him as often as we could, but not everybody has a family that can spend that much time with them and stay engaged. So some of the research is looking at what is the most engaging, and also what can be engaging that's not terribly labor intensive. Singing and dementia. It's very commonly observed that musicality stays in people even after they've lost other kind of cognitive functions. And if anybody followed, Gabby Giffords, and when she was recuperating from her gunshot wound, that she had a lot of difficulty speaking, but she could sing, and she would learn to talk through singing. And if you haven't seen the movie The King's Speech, it's one of my favorites, which is about the former King of England who had a terrible, terrible stutter and had not planned on taking over, during World War II in a terrible time, and had to make public speeches. A lot of the coaching that he received was by singing, because if he sang, then he would be able to get words out without stuttering. So it is a different part of the brain. Listening to music and singing have been shown to reduce depression, agitation, aggression, impaired social interactions, and sleep disturbance. And hormones that stimulate memory, social bonding, reduce stress, and boost the immune system, both during and after singing. So the purple part there, the dorsal medial prefrontal cortex, is associated with autobiographical memories and emotions, and it is highly stimulated during music activities. And in some dementias, this area is relatively preserved and can be one of the last regions of the brain to shrink. And you will see that with my deck. This is a quote from Alicia Clare. Comes from the National Strategy on Dementia coming out of the UK. Singing is integral to the life quality of those who are in progressive dementia and their caregivers. It functions to provide islands of arousal, awareness, familiarity, comfort, community, and success like nothing else can. It is particularly valuable as an intervention because it is accessible to a wide array of individuals and can include persons across cultures and socioeconomic strata. It is also effective in severe late-stage dementia when responses to other stimuli are non-existent. Jessica Cohen-Mansfield has done an incredible number of studies, wonderful studies, on dementia and engagement. In one study, he evaluated the benefits of simple activities and interactions such as conversations, joint participation in games, or physical activities and music. The interventions were based on a standardized framework, but personalized to the person's current and previous interests, occupation, cognitive and functional abilities, and symptoms. So you have that standard template, but then you fine-tune it so it meets the needs of and addresses the specifics of the person and their life. So overall, they found that the symptoms of agitation, including shouting, which is one of the more difficult behaviors to manage, were reduced by 25%, again the same amount you'd get if you were using Risperdal. Another study that he did, they looked at pleasure, interest, and negative affect. And they presented participants with predetermined activities, 4 per day over 3 weeks. And they were categorized as live social stimuli, which included a real dog, a real baby, and social interaction with a research assistant. Simulated social interaction, lifelike doll, stuffed animal, robotic animal, and video. So the reason that they're doing it this way is they're wanting to find out, going from the most labor-intensive to not so labor-intensive, if there are gradations there in terms of just, pragmatic matters. Reading stimulus, large print magazine, manipulative stimuli, squeeze ball, activity pillow, building blocks, tetherball, listening to music, art-related, flower arrangement, coloring with markers, work-related, stamping, sorting envelopes, folding towels, sorting jewelry. 2 different stimuli match to identity in terms of family, occupation, or interest. The most engaging activities were a visitor with a baby, a visitor with a dog, and one-on-one social interaction. But interesting, there was a modest positive effect for work-like activities, and many people were engaged for the full 15 minutes of the intervention. So I think folding towels was the most engaging. Not what you would really think, but the person is then doing something that's actually useful. So and advantageous because it requires much less caretaker time to implement, and is preferable to feeling unoccupied, isolated, bored, distressed, or agitated, which is the way most people are left. When I was doing the search, I was really struck by this study. It's the only study. There was so much humor that my parents engaged in both before and after dementia, and so I wanted to see if there was anything in the literature that would capture that. And there's this one study, but it's a really quite a study, where they studied the impact of humor therapy on mood, agitation, behavioral disturbances, and social engagement. And they found that weekly visits by clowns, plus the training of staff members to provide humor therapy, reduced agitation by 20% among 180 residents in 17 nursing homes compared with a control group.
You stay with the same person for quite some time. So, for instance, I've got a lady who used to be an English teacher, so she's very articulate, she loves stories, so I will always prepare a story to bring for her, and she might play one of the roles, play one of the characters, but that might not work at all with somebody else, so there's certainly preparation. Wouldn't you say?
Yes, and it's very, very important to find out who they are, what kind of life they lead, because of course they've lived long, full lives, and that gives the performer a lot of material. Great to get family stories that you can wind into the visit. You know, like, oh, I heard the other day you lost your bikini down at the beach. Who told you that? You know, that kind of thing. You know, it's important that those family stories are brought up again and again, because that's the link with the individual person and their family members. So reinforcing certain things like that is really vital in keeping them in the present, and it's working from the past that brings them into the present. This is my other wife. Don't tell my other wife.
Isn't that lovely?
Joanna plays the piano accordion, and the fabulous thing about a piano accordion is it can wake people out of a coma.
Yes, it's not soft. And it also plays lots of different styles. So sometimes we might have some fun and have a Greek day or a Spanish day, or we'll all do tango. And the accordion's wonderful because it can adapt to all those styles. People transform with this program. We've had people who are completely non-verbal. You're welcome. We've had people who are non-verbal who become verbal during this program, and that's really not an exaggeration. People who come out of their shells and will tell you all kinds of incredible stories about where they've been. But what's so nice is we keep seeing the same people week in and week out. And they do, I don't think they do forget, actually.
No,
I do feel recognised when I come in to the facility.
I think the important thing is that it's improvisational to a large degree, wouldn't you?
Yep, absolutely, because you never know what's going to happen with the people that you're working with. They're not an audience sitting there quietly. They're in an interesting environment where things change, so we have to be able to change as well with them.
And some days music is really appropriate and works wonderfully. Other days not so much, more visual humour, more just conversation, I think would be the best thing. So you can't predict, particularly in high care dementia, how each week. You never preempt your visit, you just take each day as it comes. Some people are feeling really good that day, other people don't want to see, so you're really at the whim of the day.
Yeah, I think they made the point too about, they really, try to really be sensitive to where the person is at and what the person, their mood and, rather than having like, kind of a standard regulated thing, so it's much more tuned in to the needs of the person. The other thing I learned about is something called reminiscence therapy and life story work. Reminiscence therapy is a biographical intervention that involves either group reminiscence work, if it's done in a group, where the past is discussed, or the use of stimuli such as music or pictures. And the life story work is very similar and related. It focuses on putting together a life story album for the individual. So it's most effective for individuals with mild to moderate dementia, not so much when it's really progressed. It can improve the relationship, whether it's with the family member or professionals, between the person with dementia and their caregivers. And certainly, you know, for caregivers who might not know a person well, if there's an album that shows this person's life and what their interests are and what their favorite foods and movies and all that are, that's another way of really connecting with somebody and who that person is and was. And it allows the individual to map where they have been, their jobs, their favorite foods, and any other information that's specific to his or her life. They have found improvements in depression, loneliness, and general well-being. And it's also especially valuable and grounding when the person is transferred from a home to an institutional setting or between institutions, which my dad actually had both of those, from home to one nursing home care and then from that one to another one. And those kind of transitions are tough for people because they don't know where they are, and it's very confusing, and their routine is disrupted. You know, it can take a real toll. So the United States really lags behind other countries in addressing dementia in a number of different ways. We released our first national plan in 2012. France began addressing dementia in 2001 and is now carrying out its third national plan. England launched their national dementia strategy in 2009, which sets out 17 recommendations focusing on raising awareness and understanding, early diagnosis and support, and living well with dementia. So there's other governments that are, funding research, funding care, way ahead of us. If you look at this slide, this is selected country support for paid long-term care for age 65 and up. And you can see that the United States is the lowest, Australia being 13.9%, Japan 12.6%. The OECD is a conglomerate of about 30 countries, 12.2%, France 11.1%, and then the United States at only 6.5%. And then this is government support for paid long-term care at home, age 65 plus. And again, the United States is significantly lower than everybody else. If you look at, United States, 47-50% compared with Japan, which is upwards of 700. So yeah, it's really a significant difference. And this is the percent of informal caregivers providing care in the U.S. Many people, like my mother, care for their loved one at home until that becomes impossible. And I certainly, in my practice, see people that are trying to work and care for their elderly parent and to maybe juggle children, and there's not support for that. As anyone who's either been through it themselves or known someone, it takes a huge toll, and there has not been a whole lot of support governmentally for that as well. In Europe, they have, it's called the European Alzheimer's Alliance, and it's committed to prevention, diagnosis, treatment, research, and social policies. And essentially all of those countries band together and they share resources and they have joint programming. They work together. And the outside of Europe, Australia, Japan, Israel, Taiwan, all do the same thing. So in conclusion, I wanted to end with this quote from Judith Graham from the New York Times, who does a blog on dementia. For me, the takeaway is clear. Other countries with which the U.S. is closely aligned have embraced long-term care as a social responsibility. Well, we have not. Unless and until we do so, caregivers here will be among the most harried, stressed, and burdened among wealthy, developed countries in the world. So, oh, right, sorry, forgot this slide, most important one. Yeah, that's my dad in the middle. This is at the Soldiers' Home in Holyoke with the whole family. Maybe a couple, I think that was in 2009, Thanksgiving 2009. Yeah, that was. So my mother's going to introduce the Hansel film. My father was born in Germany. His American name was Henry, but his German name was Hansel. So, but before that, I just wanted to play literally 30 seconds from another film my brother did years before, just to show you how my father spoke before he had dementia. This clip is from another film that my brother did called Walter and Henry, which was to celebrate 50 years in this country. My father and uncle came over from Nazi Germany in 1938, and this was filmed in 1988. And it's a family docudrama. I'm just taking a tiny little bit out of it, but describing what their experience was being in Nazi Germany and then coming over to the United States.
Some people talk about Holocaust survivors. Well, Walter and I were fortunate enough to leave Germany in 1938 before World War II. So technically we're not Holocaust survivors. But in a larger sense, we are Holocaust survivors. We would have been in it and probably have been consumed by it.
Can you all hear me? Am I okay? Well, it certainly is a very great... This way?
Yeah.
Okay. It is a very great pleasure and honor to be here and to be sharing this program with my husband and continuing his legacy. I'd like to talk a little bit about his life and how he adapted to dementia. And after we show the film, if there's time, I'd like to read you some of the conversations which I recorded, which are not in the film, which occurred a little bit earlier, which show him even in a more developed state than he was in the film. My son Keith, who produced the film, was formerly a correspondent for CNN, and he now teaches broadcasting at Champlain College in Burlington, Vermont. About Henry's life, he was born in Nuremberg, Germany, and as Lisa told you, his name was Hans, and his mother, who adored him, always lovingly referred to him as Hansel. It's kind of an affectionate little Hans. And those of us who love him, for the most part, do still refer to him as Hansel. Henry, all of his life, was hugely grateful to have survived the Holocaust, and certainly aware of those who did not, and very proud to have become an American citizen. At the same time, he carried with him traumatic memories of experiences with the toxicity of Nazism. He was forced he came here when he was 11 years old, 1938, with his parents and his older brother Walter. While still in Germany, he was forced to leave the neighborhood school because they wanted to make it what they called Judenrein, cleansed of Jews. He was able to go to a Jewish school in a neighboring town, which was an excellent school, but nevertheless, it was a very traumatic rupture. The most traumatic memory for him was when he had finished playing out in the street with neighborhood kids and was on his way home when an older kid, a bully, leaped on top of him, knocked him to the ground, and was about to drive a nail into his forehead, as he said, the Jews had done to Christ, when a woman passerby fortunately heard his screams and was able to rescue him. When they came to the United States, they settled in Upper Manhattan, Washington Heights, which was kind of an enclave for German Jewish refugees. So it was a community of people who were known to each other, friends, relatives, neighbors, and so on. It was still a difficult time because it was the Depression. His father, who knew little English, had been a successful businessman in Germany, and it was very, very difficult for anyone to find work. And all he could do was work as a dishwasher for 16 hours a day at Longshan's restaurant, and that was very devastating, both emotionally and physically. And although he did eventually get better employment, he died of a massive heart attack at age 47. For Henry, being in America was very liberating. He could play out in the streets. He got an excellent education in New York City. Tuition was free. He went to Bronx High School of Science, still one of the top schools in the country, and then to City College, and joined the Army after the war, got the GI Bill, and was able to go to graduate school and become a clinical psychologist. We married in 1950, and both went to graduate school. And then, after he got his Ph.D., we moved to Northampton, Massachusetts, where he worked for 32 years at the VA hospital. Signs of dementia began to appear in his early 70s, shortly after he had open heart surgery. And it was a slow progression. He did not have Alzheimer's. He had a vascular dementia, and so had more functioning than someone would have with Alzheimer's. He was able to adapt, as you will see, in a remarkable way, to a large extent because of the strengths that he had. He was great. He had learned how to adapt. He had an encyclopedic knowledge of the world, of geography, of history, of current events. And so with my prompting, he was able to recall quite a bit of that. He was a very, very connecting person, so he continued to get great pleasure from engaging with family and with friends. He had a great sense of humor, and above all, a terrific imagination, and he lived in his imagination when he had dementia. He once wrote a theme when he was a freshman at City College on his imagination, and he said, "I cannot imagine my life without living without imagination. It gives me such a variety in life. And Albert Einstein once said, logic can take you from A to B. Imagination can take you everywhere. And it took us everywhere, all over the world, to places that I had never been and certainly never even heard of. And one of his favorite places was Antofagasta, Chile, which I learned was a coastal town. And in Antofagasta, he would visit the beautiful mermaids who would sing to him, and of course, he would kiss them. So, in his dementia, he was able to experience a lot of joy at times and to give joy to others.